There is all sorts of metabolic mayhem that's going on in people who are living with Alzheimer's disease. And what it looks like upstream before you get to an Alzheimer's diagnosis is you tend to have mental health problems. It's now increasingly recognized that mental health problems are essentially a metabolic problem. Cells are not functioning well. And if you can't get fuel into the cell to be converted to energy, you get outward symptoms. So upstream, you might have a mental health problem. You might have brain fog. You might have type 2 diabetes, or you might have a problem with excess weight gain. Many people don't understand the role that insulin plays as our hormone of growth and storage. And if you want to lose weight, then you need to reduce the insulin response. If you want to gain weight, you need to increase the insulin response. So we need to be thoughtful with diet. And the short list of things I'd share with people are eat real food. Ultra-processed food is not real food, and it will destroy your life, and it will destroy your metabolism. Make sure that whatever you do dietarily, you're asking yourself, what is my goal? What am I trying to accomplish with this meal? Am I trying to gain? Am I trying to lose? Do I want an insulin response? Do I not want that?
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, a show that explores leadership, authenticity, and doing what makes you feel most alive. I'm your host, Mary Lou Kaiser, and it is so great to have you here today. I'm the author of The River Only Runs One Way and The Far Unlit Unknown. 2 books available right now at your favorite online book retailer. Go grab yourself a copy of each and make them your companions on the next leg of your leadership journey. Also, you have been hearing me talk about my forthcoming book, It's Not You, It's the Algorithm. This book is a call to slow down, look up, and remember who you were before the scroll told you who to be. Stay tuned for details as the launch date approaches. All right, on to today's guest, Eric Collett. Eric is the man who's rewriting the script on brain health and challenging everything we thought we knew about aging. Imagine a world where Alzheimer's isn't an inevitable decline, but a preventable condition. That is not science fiction. That is Eric's mission. A former memory care executive turned brain health revolutionary, Eric went from running a struggling care facility to developing a groundbreaking protocol that's helping people reverse cognitive decline. We are talking about Parkinson's patients doing jumping jacks after being wheelchair bound, and dementia patients dramatically improving their cognitive scores. With a childhood dream of building flying machines and a professional journey that's taken him from caring for seniors to consulting with NFL athletes, Eric isn't just another health expert. He's a visionary who believes your brain's potential is limited only by your willingness to understand and nurture it. His company, A Mind for All Seasons, isn't just treating symptoms. They are uncovering the root causes of neurological challenges, from dental health to environmental toxins. If you've ever wondered whether cognitive decline is truly inevitable, or if you're ready to take control of your brain's future, this conversation will change everything you think you know about health, aging, and human potential. You can find Eric on LinkedIn and his website. Links to connect with him are in the show notes. When you connect, let him know you heard him here on the Play Your Position podcast. So, team, are you ready for kickoff? I certainly am. Let's go. All right, Eric. Well, first of all, I'm super excited that you have decided to join me today here at the Play Your Position podcast, because what you do in the world is not only important, but fascinating. And to get us started, lay the groundwork for us. Tell us your story about when you first got the call to leadership, or what you remember about when you thought to yourself, wow, I'm in this leadership space. How old were you? What was going on in your life? And then bring us to today and connect it to what you're doing with A Mind for All Seasons.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited to have the conversation with you. I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you for that privilege. When it comes to the call to leadership, looking back, I've always been a leader. I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't have that call ringing in my ears and I wasn't answering it. I'm the oldest of 5 boys. So as my brothers came along, I was naturally a leader with them. But one of the earliest moments where I was influencing people outside the family that I can recall was in 4th grade, when, as a young man who had always been interested in flight, I went to the library and I just got a stack of books about airplanes and helicopters and how they worked. And I would beg my parents to go to the airport so I could watch planes taking off. And I was fascinated with that. And I came to understand the principles behind what allows a machine to get off the ground. And I started talking to my friends, and I had this dream that we were going to build a personal flying vehicle, and we were going to fly into the schoolyard and surprise all of our friends.
I love it.
And I drew up these plans, and I actually convinced a whole group of boys to come over every day after school to my house, where we were building what was going to be kind of like a helicopter. And so I had these rough sketches, and we would go to old job sites or to the decrepit barn in the backfield behind my house, and we would rob wood and bring it home. And we were building this wooden contraption in the driveway. And none of us ever considered that there was zero chance that this thing would get off the ground. But it was an exciting project to work on, until about the time that we realized that we had filled the entire driveway with this structure that we were building, and it was nothing more than the tail section. And we all kind of looked at each other and realized,
oh, wow,
where are we going to build the rest of it? And somehow we just sort of drifted from the project. But looking back, somehow something was in me at that age that I was able to tell a story that was compelling enough that it inspired my friends to come over and to throw their blood, sweat, and tears after a project that was doomed to failure. But we sure had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. And you were 10 at the time or thereabouts, 4th grade? Yeah. That's awesome.
So looking back, what that meant to me is I wanted to do real work. I wanted to do something that made a difference. And it felt really good when other people rallied to the cause. And as I grew, whether it was being a patrol leader in my Boy Scout troop or leading out in the classroom in school or other opportunities, I've always been called on to do things like that. And from a young age, I've also enjoyed public speaking. I was one of those weird kids that would go to a speech festival and I would participate in the improv competition where they'd give you a topic and you'd have like 60 seconds to collect your thoughts. And then you go speak for as long as you could. And you would get rated on the talk that you gave. And I loved doing that. And I know that a lot of people would rather jump off a cliff than do something like that. So as I got into my professional life in about the year 2000, when I started working in an assisted living community, first as a program director and then as the executive director of the building, I was influencing people, whether it was running a department or running the organization and trying to rally people to that cause. And it was deeply satisfying to really ask the question, what would inspire this person to do more or be more, or rise up to what's within them? So I've always been fascinated by that. And as I got about 16 years into my career, there were some real changes that took place in my life where I recognized that I needed to do more. I felt compelled to do more. And I had that within me. Entrepreneurship is something that was a dinner table conversation at our house. My dad started his own company before I was born, and he ran it for 40 years before selling it to one of my younger brothers. Most of my siblings are entrepreneurs themselves. So we all just grew up just talking about business and the latest roller coaster ride that the company was on. So was kind of in my blood.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear some of the details about the shift that ultimately led to starting Mind for All Seasons in 2016?
Yeah, because those are the details that listeners can relate to, especially people who may be at that pivotal point of feeling called towards something else, whether it's bigger or just a lateral move. I mean, we learn best from hearing other people who faced perhaps a difficult decision, because I'm guessing that that role was a good one, that you were successful. You were basically the CEO. That's what an executive director is in a nonprofit. So what happened in 2016?
It was actually what happened a couple of years before that. To be candid, Mary Lou, my wife, Amy, who I've now been very happily married to for over 26 years, from the day that we got married, we knew that she had a rare eye disease.
Oh.
She was blind at night from the time she was about 11 or 12. So we knew that when we first got married, and we knew that this eye disease was progressive and that it ultimately led to total blindness in most people by late adulthood. And it involves a loss of peripheral vision. And her peripheral vision was getting worse and worse. So she was down to about a 10-degree visual field. And it's kind of like looking through tubes, if you will, cardboard tubes, if you can picture that. Yeah. And so she had to quit driving. And there I was working on call 24/7, running a memory care community. And by this point, I had answered the call to move back home to Boise, Idaho, where I grew up. I took over a struggling memory care community. Within a year, we turned it around from 72% occupancy to 100% occupancy and ran it with a waiting list. And so to your point, yes, our team was very successful in what we were doing, and we were recognized as the local leader. And I was getting asked to go to everything from skilled nursing facilities to the local hospitals to train social workers and certified nursing assistants and nurses and other administrators how to do the kinds of things that we did. Because we were good at taking on tough cases and turning them around and having more success. And I recognized there was a need for that kind of information. And at the same time of recognizing that, I was stressed to the max because I was on call 24/7. We had 4 kids by this point, and none of them were driving. Amy had to quit driving. So I was the sole driver with a busy family.
Oh my gosh.
And I was involved in church and civic responsibilities outside. I've always believed in volunteering and giving of my time and energy to other causes. And so I was stretched as thin as could be. And the pivotal point was one day in kind of late 2015 when I was driving the family to a school play for my little girl at the elementary school. And en route, my cell phone rang. It was the memory care community. And I listened to a very distressed staff member who said, "Eric, we need you." And she went on to explain that one of our residents who was on hospice services, but not expected to die anytime soon. She was relatively stable for a hospice patient. She was surprisingly had taken a turn for the worse and was dying.
Oh my
goodness. And her family was gathered around and they were in distress because this had come out of the blue for them.
Yeah.
And there was no one else that could be around to help them. And I knew I needed to go. I had a responsibility. But I dropped off my family, honestly, not knowing how they were going to get home because I didn't know how long I would be. Yeah. And I spent the 15 minutes driving to that community, to my job, feeling like the worst husband and father on the planet because I was abandoning my family and I couldn't go to the play with my little girl. And then I spent the next few hours with that family feeling like the worst team member on the team because I resented being there. I didn't want to be there.
No.
I wanted to be at the play. And I realized this is not a good situation. And so I got home really late that night. Everybody had gone to bed. And I looked in the bathroom mirror and I didn't recognize myself. I was 30 pounds overweight. I was stressed to the max. I hadn't read a book in years, which is totally unlike me. I was not living the life that I wanted to live, even though on the outside, from everyone else's view, I was wildly successful and I was at the top of my game and things looked good and we had a great family. But inwardly, I felt like I was a fragment of myself. And I literally said to myself, "Eric, you're going to die an early death if you keep this up. You have to make a change."
Yeah.
So when you get to rock bottom, you start seeing things differently. And the next morning I woke up, I'll never forget this conversation. Amy and I had a conversation before I went off to work. And I said, honey, I have to make a change. And she said, Eric, you've been talking about doing a business for a long time. You have ideas. Now, what is it that you think you should do? And I said, well, I'd love to be a solopreneur and I'd love to consult and kind of take this information to the masses. She said, what is stopping you? And I said, when am I going to have time to start a job? Because in my mind, Mary Lou, it was, I've got to moonlight. And I had no time.
Yeah.
There was zero bandwidth.
Right.
And Amy took a deep breath and she just looked at me and she kind of smiled and said, have you ever thought that maybe you need to quit your day job so you have time to start a company? And that's when the clouds parted, the light came through, and I finally saw what I was missing. It was like, yeah, it was one of those moments that was so exciting.
Yeah.
And I realized if you have that kind of courage and confidence in me, then I can have that kind of courage and confidence. And so within just a few days, I gave notice. And long story short, the owners kind of freaked out because they were either going to hire a management company and retire, or they were going to sell it and retire. They were kind of getting to that point in life. And they said, Eric, if you leave now and our occupancy dips, then we lose valuation. They dangled a pretty big carrot. We made an agreement. I stayed an extra 7 months. That carrot became basically the seed money to start the company. And it was a good thing because projects like this always cost more and take more time than you ever think that they will. So, the last 9 years have been a pretty fun ride. And I never could have predicted when I started A Mind for All Seasons in 2016 that we would be doing the work that we're doing now. But I'm so grateful for the ride and what I've learned along the way.
Yeah. I love so many things about that story. The support of your wife, the trust that she had and has in you, that rock bottom. When we hear about a rock bottom story, we often equate it to something related to drugs and alcohol, right? Like, but yours was, I think, perhaps a more common but less spoken about kind of rock bottom moment when you do look yourself in the eye, in the mirror, and say, what are you doing? This is not working anymore, right? And again, you had the support of your wife. You obviously had a great relationship with your team at the memory care place because they didn't want to lose you, but and then to have the courage to step out on your own after you basically cut the golden handcuffs, as we like to say. You didn't know what you were going into, or I like to say you stepped into the far and lit unknown, which is where the magic happens. And we can't predict, you just can't know. You just have to trust that you're on the right path. And I think that's one of the tenets of modern leadership is being willing to take a risk, whether it's with your organization, and we're going to get to A Mind for All Seasons in a minute, or it's in your personal life where you're going to lose. I think that's one of the hardest things is that going into it, you are losing something that has been valuable, whether it's the paycheck, whether it's the benefits, or maybe it's even the location you're in, because making the shift requires you to physically move. And yet you did that. And so here you are, 2025, as we record this. Mind for All Seasons has been running for 9 years. It has evolved, to your point, not what you initially imagined, right? Tell us, again, walk us through what did it start out as in your mind? What did you think it was going to be, and what is it now?
Well, thank you for that question. If you're okay, before I get to that, there's a real important lesson wrapped up in the story, and I didn't fully realize it until you brought up something in your earlier comments. You talked about the idea that normally when we have a rock bottom story, it's in the context of addiction.
Yes.
And that gave me pause because I actually was addicted at that point. And I think a lot of people are addicted and they don't even know it. I was addicted to security. I was addicted to what I thought was predictability. And I was addicted to the story that I kept telling myself. And so often what keeps us stuck in life are the stories we tell ourselves. It's been said, it's only the view from where you sit that makes you feel defeat. Life is full of many aisles, so why don't you change your seat? And I was failing to change my seat because of the story that I had told myself for years of how this thing was going to go. And I had to learn one really important thing along the way. And I think I'm still trying to learn this all the time. I think every entrepreneur is trying to learn this. But I wish I could take credit for the phrase that illustrates it. It actually comes from one of my clients who's become one of my dear friends, and we kind of coach each other back and forth. He's a mindset coach for college and professional athletes. And in a conversation, maybe a year ago, he said, Eric, when you get comfortable being uncomfortable, you become unstoppable. And I really think that's the lesson that I needed to learn in this situation, because I was addicted to comfort and security and predictability, and it was killing me.
Thank you for connecting those dots, because I imagine many listeners can relate to that, either for themselves or someone in their life. And it is what keeps people playing small. It's what keeps people from stepping into a dream that they could have been carrying for decades. And I think that because what you're about to tell us, you started with the vision of what a Mind for All Seasons was, and how there's probably elements of it still intact, but it isn't what in any, how can you possibly predict what it was going to become 9 years later?
Yeah. I had to quit telling myself one story after story after story.
Those darn stories.
Yeah. I mean, our goal right now literally is to save 1 million brains by 2030, and then many millions more after that. And that is not the goal that I started with. What I saw when I started A Mind for All Seasons is that people did not have a good understanding, either professionally or in families that were dealing with dementing illnesses. They didn't have an understanding of how the world looks to someone living with Alzheimer's or vascular dementia or another type of dementia. And I could see that. I understood that. I had learned how to teach people what it takes to get in someone else's shoes and see the world from their vantage point, and to make life better by interacting with them in a way that makes sense to them. I developed a whole framework early on called the Vital 5 Pillars of Effective Interaction. And these principles actually make a difference in all of our human interactions. And so when I started A Mind for All Seasons, I was already teaching people about these principles, and I just wanted to take it to a broader audience. And so I was going to consult with both family and professional caregivers and help them learn these skills. Well, fast forward a year into it, and I was invited to consult with a large assisted living company in Arizona that had just brought on some facilities. They were a relatively new company, and they had brought on some communities that had memory care in them. And the owners were total rookies at memory care. They didn't know anything about it. And somebody referred them to me. And I had gone down to Arizona to have a conversation with them about a year-long project to create the ultimate memory care program, or what I thought at the time was the ultimate memory care program. And I left with a handshake agreement that we had the details basically ironed out, and they were going to talk to their third business partner who would sign off on the deal in the next couple of days, and we'd get rolling with things. They said, we'll call you within a couple of days. We'll be moving forward. They didn't call, and they didn't call, and they didn't call. And 2.5 or 3 weeks went by, and I was starting to get a little bit nervous. And as a person of faith, I literally prayed, and I said, God, if this is not the right thing for me, then please don't let it happen. And I promise that I'll be grateful, but I really want this.
Yeah.
And so if it's at all possible, please help this happen. And a couple of days later, I got a call from the owner of the company, or the main guy that I had initial contact with. And he said, Eric, we're so sorry. You probably think we can't walk and chew gum at the same time because, we've dragged you on all these weeks. But right after you left, we started having talks with a nurse practitioner who's done some fellowships and advanced training with some of the top researchers in the world, including a guy at UCLA who runs the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. And he's learned some techniques that he's absolutely convinced could help many of our residents reverse some of their dementia symptoms. And when I heard that, because I'm kind of a nerd and I actually read research, I said, "Oh, is that the research of Dr. Bredesen at UCLA?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, sounds like you're already familiar with it." And I said, "Are you working with Dr. Bredesen?" They said, "No, we're working with this guy named Randy Vaudry, but he trained with Dr. Bredesen. He's studied all that, and he's been applying those techniques with real patients. And actually, he lives in Idaho just like you do." And it turns out he lives about 3.5 hours away from where I live in Boise. And they said, "We can't work with both you and him. And so we've decided that we're going to work with him. But we hope we can maintain a relationship with you."
Oh,
okay. So the door closed, or it felt like the door closed. I couldn't know at the time that the door was swinging wide open, because here's what happened that was so exciting. I expressed gratitude for the opportunity. They said, "Hey, you should call Randy. You should get to know what he's doing." And inwardly, I was thinking, yeah, right, I just lost the biggest contract of my business so far, and I got to find a way to replace it because I need to feed my family.
Right.
And so I hung up the phone and I hustled for the next few months. And fast forward about 2.5 months, and I got a phone call from this guy named Randy Vaudry out of the blue. And he said, "Yeah, I'm working with the Vista Senior Living in East Mesa, Arizona, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I'm that guy basically that got the contract that you were fighting for." And he said, "They want me to train their staff because we can't really do what I'm trying to roll out with their staff if they're not well trained." And I said, "Well, I'm a clinician. I don't know how to train their staff." And they said, "We know a guy. You should talk to him." And he said, "So I'm calling you because it sounds like you have skill in that area." Well, it turned out the next week I was headed toward his part of the state to consult at a hospital down there. And I said, "I'm coming your way. Let's get together." And I sat in his living room one night from 6 o'clock till after midnight. And he pulled out this Bible-sized stack of research that he had done, where he had combed into the footnotes of the footnotes of the footnotes, really looking deep at all of this dementia research. And I left that night absolutely convinced that we could make a bigger difference for people with dementing illnesses, but that it would take both the art side and the science side of the equation. The art side is the interpersonal side. That's what I had. Randy has the science side. And we looked at each other that night and said, 1 + 1 is 10 in this case.
Yeah.
So we went all in with that community. He split the contract with me. Neither of us were going to make much money at all, but we said, this is a chance to change the world.
Yeah.
And we developed the very first program in an assisted living community where we would do everything from look at lifestyle factors like exercise and diet and sleep and stress management and modify those with residents. And we would do extensive panels of blood work looking at hormones and nutrients and inflammatory markers and metabolic markers. We'd look much more broadly than their doctors had ever looked. And we would develop personalized treatment plans for those residents to help them improve. And pretty quickly, we started having phenomenal results. Like, well, I should pause because I've just dumped a lot of stuff in
No, but
maybe you have questions about it, but
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
I don't know if I have a question more than I just have a comment about how amazing it is the way forces bigger than ourselves work. You know, you said you're a man of faith, and I know there are listeners who are believers, and whatever that looks like for you, it doesn't really matter. It's the point is, you know, that there's things that we cannot control, but are working in our favor because we made a decision to ask. You know, you asked, and I loved your description of what it seemed at first like the door was slammed shut when in fact it was swung wide open. And I think that's a really important point to hone in on, because it's so easy to think that when an opportunity that we were counting on that meant money to our family, or even another opportunity down the road, doesn't work out, sometimes looking back, that's the best thing that could have happened to us and for us, right?
Correct.
These are the subtle parts of, under this umbrella I call playing your position, of being able to sit in with grace when things don't go according to plan, when the proverbial X's and O's that you've mapped out on your whiteboard, like, this is the play we're going to run and this is how it's going to end up. It doesn't work like that. It actually almost always works better. And so, and also the fact that you guys were showing up in service. I mean, the communities that you are serving, it, culturally speaking, are not communities that we really celebrate. It's almost like we want to pretend they don't exist, because though the people in them, well, they're on the decline and they don't have much time left. So, let's just shove them over in the corner. I mean, that listeners know that I'm my mom's full-time caregiver. Even though she's semi-independent, I'm still responsible for an adult who is no longer independent and has challenges in life that, have made me pause and say, okay, what can I do proactively to prevent what's happened to her? She has Parkinson's. And from what I've read about Parkinson's is it's basically a dopamine deficit. And there's other things too, but that's one of the things they've discovered, is that the brain just isn't firing right. And so here you are, Eric, in the midst of looking at our brains, which, this is our command center, isn't it?
Right.
So talk to us about, keep going with the story and then bring it up to what you're doing now. And yeah.
Great. So here's the key to get through those tough moments where it feels like the door closed.
Yeah.
What I didn't share earlier is that when I got off the phone with the owner of that company, initially when he said, we've decided to go a different direction, I already shared with you before, Mary Lou, that I had prayed and said, I really want this, but if it's not the right thing, then please don't let it happen. And I promise I'll be grateful. When I got off the phone, I literally got on my knees and I expressed gratitude for what happened. And I said, I don't understand it right now, but I'm so thankful for this blessing in my life, that this has not happened in the way that I wanted it to, that there's something more. And you said it earlier when you said, when you realize that things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you. And that perspective shift is absolutely key to anybody navigating life, regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And when we can look ahead and recognize that things are working together for our good, then we're acting in faith. And whether a person has a belief in a being that they would call God or something different out there, anyone that I know who's successful has learned that faith is not just mere belief. It is a principle of action and of power.
Yes.
And you make things happen by moving forward, not knowing perfectly exactly what's going to happen, but with the confidence that things are working for your good and they will work out. And I feel like maybe somebody needs to hear that message. I think a lot of people need to hear that message.
I need to hear it. I mean, we got to hear that every day.
Yeah. I need to be reminded of that all the time. So here's how things developed, though, and I never could have predicted this. I'll tell you the experience of a guy named Marv, whose wife recorded a video about his experience, so I'm not breaking any sort of confidences. But Marv was a guy that was pretty gregarious and happy, and he used to tease his wife good-naturedly throughout their relationship. But as he got older, he started to become kind of mean. He didn't have much of a filter. He would say things that were unkind and abrasive, and nobody was laughing anymore. And then he started showing up with memory deficits. And so he and his wife went off to a neurologist at the recommendation of their primary care doctor, and he was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. which means you get it prior to age 65. And then things got worse. And he didn't like the diagnosis. They didn't believe it. And so they went off to another neurologist who said, yeah, I'm sorry, you have dementia. There's not much I can do for you. They went to a third neurologist. And again, the diagnosis was, you have dementia, the Alzheimer's type. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward a few years, and he was so difficult to deal with that her kids said, Mom, you cannot do this anymore. It's killing you.
Yeah.
And we don't want to lose you too. And so she moved him into a community where we were piloting this whole program. By then we had named it the Enhanced Protocol because we were trying to enhance a person's quality of life and their cognitive and mental health. So he moved in and she found out about this protocol and she started him participating in it. So we did an extensive panel of blood work. And we found out that he was really deficient in certain B vitamins. His thyroid wasn't functioning optimally. His hormones were in the toilet in a lot of ways. There were a lot of things that were not going well for him. And we started working on all those areas. People are often looking for the one thing that will make a difference. And if people remember nothing else from this podcast interview, except that brain health is never about one thing. It is always about many different factors, and those can be very different from one individual to the next. But think of it like holes in the boat. What are the holes that are sinking your ship? If you've got 20 holes in the boat and you patch one, even if you take on water a little bit slower, that ship is still going down.
Yeah,
In the case of
great
Marv,
analogy.
we just measured the holes in the boat, and we worked diligently with that facility and with his doctor to patch those holes in the boat. Well, at baseline, he had a cognitive score on a standardized cognitive test of 15 out of 30. So he was pretty far into his dementia.
Yeah.
About 6 months later, he scored 30 out of 30 and he moved back home. Now, that doesn't mean that he was cured because he later on quit being so diligent and he fell off the program and he declined again pretty rapidly. And that's exactly what we see happen with people that have dementia. If they improve, but then they quit doing the things that are making a difference, they decline again. So it's not a cure. But as we started making a difference for guys like Marv, then we started having the adult children and the spouses and the friends of the residents of this facility coming to us saying, you just helped this person with dementia improve, and nobody thinks that's possible. What could you do for my brain? I've had anxiety my entire life, and I don't want to live that way. Or I had a car wreck 2 years ago and had a traumatic brain injury. I have never been the same since. I can't sleep. I can't focus. I have brain fog. If you can help an Alzheimer's patient make measurable improvement, what could you do for my brain? And we said, we'll try. So fast forward a couple of years, and that facility now has a revenue stream outside their bed count because not only are they taking care of their residents, but they're also serving people in the broader community who are paying them for help, and we're providing the guidance and support to do all of that. And we thought, man, this is like the future of healthcare. This is huge. And so we went all in. We opened an office. We invested in a bunch of medical devices that further amplify the effectiveness. We hired some staff. We were going to grow this thing and take it to all the long-term care professionals that we could possibly get it to in the world. And we had just opened the office in late November of 2019. And you see where I'm going with this, don't you?
Yes, I do. Oh, man, here it comes.
Okay, so the other shoe dropped. Yeah, COVID absolutely shut things down. We could no longer even go in the communities that we were working with. And it all fell apart. And we lost 3/4 of our revenue just like that overnight. At a time when we had just taken on all sorts of debt. And
Of course.
all sorts of staff, people that were counting on us. So I didn't take a paycheck for many months. It was more than 6 months before I took a paycheck. But we kept everybody working that we had hired. They worked remotely. We found things for them to do. But immediately off the bat, I sat in my office and I asked myself one question, one most important question that I've asked in my business. What would have to be true for me to look back on this time and say that the COVID pandemic was the absolute best thing that ever happened to a Mind for All Seasons? And as I sat there pondering that, staring out the window at the golf course that's behind my office, eventually an answer came. And the answer was, cast your net on the other side of the boat. And I knew what that meant for me. What that meant is we
wow.
had seen the pivot that we needed to make down the road. The pivot was, hey, we need a way to serve individuals across the country and help them get their brains to a better place, because the ultimate way to treat Alzheimer's disease is to never get it in the first place. We know that dementing illnesses often start 20 or more years before symptoms even show up. So by the time someone's in their 40s and 50s, they could already have pathology going on in their brain. They're just not aware of it. And where the research has gone is that Alzheimer's is largely preventable. Lots of these diseases are preventable. And in the short run, you can get your brain to a way better place, which improves your quality of life today.
Yes.
But at the same time, you can change the trajectory that you're on long term. And we said, that's the future. That's what we really need to focus on. And so we just made the pivot earlier than we otherwise would have. We shifted the story and we went all in developing tools and systems and processes that would allow us to help people all over the United States get the blood work done that they need, get the coaching that they need, get a personalized treatment summary so that they could take the steps to move forward. And we've learned in doing that if we take someone like you that's healthy and doesn't show any signs of dementia and is doing their work, that we can measure things in a fine-tuned way to see problems that might show up decades down the road. And we can help people improve their cognitive scores, usually by about 20 to 30% in a few months. And along the way, I realized our brains are like our hardware, and all of our life skills are like software. So from the entrepreneur standpoint, I've learned now from working with everyone from business leaders to NFL athletes that your brain is your tool. And the sharper it is, the better you do and the easier everything is. And I've seen a lot of business leaders who thought that they needed to go read more books on productivity to get more stuff done in the day. What they really needed was to get a hardware upgrade. Because you can go to all the master classes you want, you can read all the books that you want on productivity, but that's like software. And if you load new software on dysfunctional hardware, it never works very well.
It doesn't work.
But if we can help someone get their processing speed in their brain improve by 30%, guess how much more stuff they get done in the day? And when your energy is not sagging late in the day, it's magical what that means. It means people can get home and they can get on the floor and play with their kids or grandkids. It means that they've got gas in the tank left to do their recreational activities at the end of the day. It means they show up better for everybody that they serve in their lives. And I am so thankful that my company has had to go through the pandemic. I'm not thankful any of us had to face that. I wish we didn't. But I am thankful for what it meant for A Mind for All Seasons and the thousands of people that we're able to serve across this country. And that would not have happened without that really difficult shift.
Yeah. Wow. So for listeners who are thinking to themselves, am I 10 years into this? Like, what can people start doing today, Eric, that will help them shift towards the big work that you do when someone comes and actually engages with you at the level? Like, what are some tips for today? It's not to go read another book on productivity, obviously, or sign up for a masterclass, right? Not that those things are bad. And I don't think that's what you're saying. But is there something that the average listener could begin right now to, optimize their brain health as in that trajectory versus continue the decline that they may not even be aware they're contributing to?
Yeah, great question. There's about 100 things on the list. If we go back to the analogy of holes in the boat, there's roughly 100 things that I could point to, but they fall into two categories.
Okay.
One is lifestyle factors that I consider the foundation of optimal cognitive and mental health. It's stuff that you really can't medicate or supplement your way out of. And then the rest is stuff that you can measure in a blood test and that really needs to be individualized, and you need expertise to delve into that. So let's focus on building a healthy foundation, which anybody can start with today.
Yes.
If someone said, Eric, what is the most important thing that I can do for my brain today? I would say, hands down, the easy answer is you need to optimize your sleep. We learned in about 2014 that there's a whole system called the glymphatic system that runs while we're sleeping. The glymphatic system is the waste removal system of the brain. When we're asleep, the brain shrinks a little bit. The fluid-filled spaces, the ventricles in the brain, open up. The body makes about 1.5 cups of new cerebrospinal fluid, and it literally bathes the brain in that fluid. And there's a pumping action.
Wow.
We could go way off in the weeds, but in the last 2 months, researchers have figured out that the body makes these slow waves of norepinephrine, and it functions with a pumping action to pull misfolded proteins and cellular waste and debris up and into the cerebrospinal fluid in the brain, and to flush it out into the lymphatic system.
Wow.
The body is so fascinating. And the more we learn, the more I'm deeply humbled at how little we actually know.
And how abusive we are to our bodies and our brains.
I grew up with people saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or sleep is for the weak. And I think, well, you're going to die sooner, because sleep is literally when the brain takes out the trash. And if you don't get 7 to 8 hours of deep, restful sleep consistently every night, your risk of dementing illnesses goes through the roof. So what do you do? Where do you start? There's a lot that goes into sleeping really effectively. But number one, if you've never been screened for sleep apnea, do it. If you've got an Oura ring or a Looky Tech ring or another wearable, at least look at that and look at your sleep scores and see, is there maybe something wrong? Make sure that you are getting morning sunlight, because that sets the body clock. Make sure that you're turning off lights about an hour before bed, that you're avoiding screens. Make sure that you're not eating less than 3 hours before you go to bed, because you'll sleep a lot better. There's lots of different factors. And if someone wants to learn more about it, I mean, we'll give you some tools later that help you dig a little bit deeper. And there's also lots of stuff that you can find online. But prioritize your sleep. That is absolutely critical to brain health.
Okay.
Okay if we add a few things to the list, or do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. It doesn't need a long answer. People who are taking sleep aids, everything from melatonin supplements to like a PM version of some name brand. Ultimately, yes, no, not good.
Great question. And I'll give you 2 answers. Nothing wrong with using some melatonin if it's helpful. I think some people over-rely on melatonin. The body makes melatonin naturally. And one of the things people forget is that all this artificial lighting that we have literally suppresses melatonin.
Yeah.
So if you just are turning off lights, and even maybe turning on some red light, because red wavelengths of light naturally stimulate melatonin production.
Oh,
that's helpful.
Good to know. So like those red light masks or things like that can be really helpful.
Yeah. Or even Randy, our chief medical officer, actually has a red bulb in the lamp next to his bed. So when he's reading right before bed, because that's something that can help him get tired, he's reading by red light.
Okay.
Not blue light on the phone.
On the screen.
If you have to use a screen, use blue light blockers.
Right. The glasses. Yeah.
So just think about the natural rhythm.
I should have mine on.
Think of the natural rhythm from day to day, though.
Yeah.
When the sun comes up in the morning, there are a lot of blue wavelengths of light, and that literally suppresses melatonin, helps us wake up, and it also sets the body clock so that about 12 hours later, a whole hormonal cascade occurs that prepares us for deep, restful sleep.
Oh my gosh, fascinating.
As the sun is setting, we get more red wavelengths of light, and that stimulates melatonin production. And that's part of the shift that says, hey, it's time to get ready for bed. So little things end up being big things.
What are 2 more things that people can do for just because of, I would love to hear all 100. We just don't have time.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's something people are going to have to dig deeper.
Right. There's a short list of lifestyle factors. So the next 2 biggest things on the list, number 1 is exercise. Exercise is not just something to do because you want to look good in a bathing suit, which is, I think, a lot of people's motivation. Exercise literally stimulates a growth factor for brain cells. It's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's kind of like miracle grow for brain cells. And when you exercise, you stimulate more of that growth factor. People ask me all the time, so Eric, should I do cardio? Should I do strength training? Each one has distinct benefits, and ideally you would do both, because Cardiovascular exercise improves blood flow. You can't have a better brain without good blood flow to the brain and without circulating oxygen through the body. But we also need to preserve muscle mass and build muscle mass. And we tend to lose muscle mass as we age, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
So, strength training so that we can be strong as we age makes a huge difference for all of us. Muscle cells has a high concentration of mitochondria. That's our energy producers in the cells. And if we're losing muscle mass, we are losing energy production capacity. And that's often the difference between being independent as we get older and living in a nursing home. So that would be the next thing on the list. The third thing that I would mention besides sleep and exercise is diet. Many people do not know that Alzheimer's disease in medical circles is often called diabetes of the brain or type 3 diabetes.
I learned that last year, that in Europe, that's what they call it, type 3 diabetes. We don't do that here.
We don't. There is all sorts of metabolic mayhem that's going on in people who are living with Alzheimer's disease. And what it looks like upstream before you get to an Alzheimer's diagnosis is you tend to have mental health problems. It's now increasingly recognized that mental health problems are essentially a metabolic problem. Cells are not functioning well.
Yes.
And if you can't get fuel into the cell to be converted to energy, you get outward symptoms. So upstream, you might have a mental health problem. You might have brain fog. You might have type 2 diabetes. Or you might have a problem with excess weight gain. Many people don't understand the role that insulin plays as our hormone of growth and storage. And if you want to lose weight, then you need to reduce the insulin response. If you want to gain weight, you need to increase the insulin response. So we need to be thoughtful with diet. And the short list of things I'd share with people are eat real food. Ultra-processed food is not real food, and it will destroy your life, and it will destroy your metabolism. Make sure that whatever you do dietarily, you're asking yourself, what is my goal? What am I trying to accomplish with this meal? Am I trying to gain? Am I trying to lose? Do I want an insulin response? Do I not want that? We need to understand that controlling blood sugar affects all of the top major diseases. Heart disease is driven by elevated blood sugar. Alzheimer's disease is driven by that. Type 2 diabetes and its complications are driven by that. So whatever you do, control your sugars and maintain metabolic flexibility where you can burn fat when it's time to burn fat, burn sugar when it's time to burn sugar. There's a lot that we could say. You and I could talk for hours about diet. And I know that you're someone who's prioritized that in your health. You've seen major benefits in your own life from being really thoughtful about how you fuel your body. But if we recognize that food is fuel, I know it's wrapped up in our celebrations and all of the things culturally that go with it. But fundamentally, food is fuel. And if we ask ourselves, well, how do I need to run my engine today?
Right.
I think we do just a little bit better and it gets us further.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. To recap, so optimize sleep, exercise, both cardio and strength are vitally important. And then pay attention to what what kind of fuel you put into your system. It does make a difference. And I think, again, to your point, we could speak for hours and hours. I can't believe our hour is almost up here. We've barely scratched the surface, but you've, I think, provided a really comprehensive baseline for the importance of really prioritizing the brain, see, a new paradigm for what this is between our ears, right? Not taking it for granted or thinking it's just gray matter, which is, for years was like, I remember when I took anatomy and physiology in high school, we were taught the brain doesn't regenerate. We now know it does, but very slowly, but it's it's cellular. It's, it's just a different kind. So for people who would like to explore what a Mind for All Seasons might be able to do for them or a loved one, where do you hang out online, Eric? And I know that you also have an offer for listeners today that Team PYP take advantage of offers.
Well, the easiest place to find us is at amindforallseasons.com, our website, and there's lots of tools and resources there. But one of the things that we do for people who are members of A Mind for All Seasons is we give them access to me, to Randy as our chief medical officer, to others on the team through online office hours. We also do a weekly masterclass where we take a deep dive on some of these specific topics. And we really delve into them, and we have a live Q&A. And people can be a member of A Mind for All Seasons for just $25 a month. Now, that gives them access to, if you want us to do blood work and you want us to write a treatment summary and you want us to go deeper, you can do that through the membership site. But there are a number of people that just want to keep learning. They want to keep growing. They want to bring lab work from their doctor and ask questions about it and have us explain it. And that's all available. But for listeners of the PYP podcast, if you go to amindforallseasons.com/join, you can sign up for a membership. And if you put the letters PYP into the discount code, then we'll give you 30 days of a free trial of an AmFast membership. And then you can poke around, you can explore all the tools and resources that are there. And if you love it, then you can be a member for as long as you want. There's no contract. And if you don't, then you can cancel anytime you want. There's no obligation.
Yeah. So team, you know that the link for this with the reminder of the coupon code or the discount code will be in the show notes for this episode. It'll be right, if you're listening on your phone, which most of you are, it's going to be right there. You just have to poke it and it'll take you there. And like I said, take advantage of this amazing offer, because what is so great about Eric and his team, A Mind for All Seasons, is that this is current. Eric and his team are constantly on top of what is the latest and greatest. You know, you heard him say earlier that, you know, he's a student and goes to the library and takes out a lot of books as a 10-year-old looking at planes. I mean, this is the kind of person you want to be working with, especially when it comes to your health. And, you know, as a disclaimer is, you know, this podcast is for educational purposes only. Obviously, you need to do your own due diligence. You need to always check with your immediate medical professionals. But at the same time, why not explore just more of what we talked about today? Again, you cannot take your health for granted, and too many people do. And the good news is you can always turn it around, right? You can always do something that moves you in the upswing direction versus just saying, oh, well, I guess you and I were joking yesterday when we were talking, Eric, about, you know, all the aging jokes that are out there and how much you can't stand them, because the way aging has been presented to us is not the way it has to be.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so true. Never underestimate the power of taking the next right step.
Yes.
And I'd love to leave your listeners with a last analogy that I think frames the entire conversation that you and I have had.
Perfect.
So when I was about 8, my brother and I went into the backfield. We dragged all sorts of barn boards home, and we built this ramshackle fort in the sandbox. And my dad took one look at it and said, "Oh no, not on my watch. I don't want you to get hurt." So he designed and built a really big play tower, 2-story play tower with these huge swings. I think the chains were something like 20 feet long. So it was like a playground swing. And once it was built, we would stand on that swing and pump up and down until we were just flying high. And it was fun. And we did that often. And I felt like such a daredevil. And it was all great until one day when I was about 10 years old, on the back swing, one of the chains broke. And I flew over the fence, landed on a log, did some real damage. And I spent the rest of the summer in a thick foam neck brace. So I was that kid.
Oh.
And what my parents wished they had known then and would have acted on had they known is that the chain at the top was rubbing against the eye bolt that it was connected to, and it was just slowly rubbing away all of that metal. Now, we've all heard people say, what you don't know won't hurt you. I learned that day that oftentimes what you don't know might kill you. And when it comes to our health, whether we're aware of it or not, there are things happening every day that are either moving us in a positive direction or they're moving us toward the path of destruction. And we think that we're fine. We live in a society that has a sick care system where we wait until the chain snaps and then we hope that the doctor has an answer. But it doesn't have to be that way any longer. We now have the ability to inspect the chain and say, oh, we better install a swivel with ball bearings so that that chain doesn't wear out and we'll never have the problem. So I invite everybody, when it comes to your health, when it comes to your life, when it comes to everything that you're doing, take advantage of the knowledge that's out there now to look at the things that are actually happening, whether you're aware of it or not. And let's leave the sick care system together and let's become a tribe of people that proactively focus on health instead of illness. Let's not manage illness. Let's focus on living well because we can now do that. We have the tools to do that.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.